So you might say that the purpose of yoga is to help us deal with this identity crisis that we're having. Okay, so if we're not so fortunate to identify with the essential self, what's the alternative to that? That's the subject of the fourth sutra, which says, Vritti sarupyam itaratra. Vritti sarupyam itaratra. Okay, so if we're not identified with the essential self, what are we identified with? Vritti. Vritti. What is vritti? Yeah, the mind spinning everything. So, I mean, one of the names for the mind is the manas. So the manas is the part of the mind that connects to what are called the indriyas, the organs of perception. So we have a sensory perception, but we don't just leave it at that. We have this sensory perception, and then what does the mind do with it? It spins it. Right? It compares it to all the other experiences we've had that were similar. And so rather than just having the clear perception, letting it go at that, it calls up this whole backlog of experience. So as a result of that, we don't really see the world as it is. How do we see it? We see it as we are, as long as we're seeing through the lens of the conditioned mind. Vritti sarupyam. In the previous sutra we had swarupe, which means the essential self. Here we have swarupe, which means, or sarupyam rather, which means the apparent self. What's the apparent self made of? It's made of our thoughts, who we think we are, our conditioned thoughts. So is this a problem? To base our identity on who we think we are? Yeah, it's a total fabrication. So, what to do if we've based our identity on an illusion? Is there a way out of this? Yoga. Oh. Yeah, we'll skip ahead a few sutras here. The 12 Sutras, one of my favorites. So Patanjali tells us how to deal with our vrittis. He says, Abhyasa Vairagyavyam Tannirodha. Abhyasa Vairagyavyam Tannirodha. It's only 3 words. Abhyasa Vairagyavyam. That's a long one. Tannirodha. So, that Tannirodha is a reference back to which sutra? The second sutra. Yeah. So, how to get the chitta to stop vritting, so to speak. So abhyasa means practice. We must practice. Probably you've noticed that that's a prerequisite as far as yoga is concerned. You need to practice it before it does you any good. Right? Just thinking about it doesn't do you much good. You have to practice it. And in fact, one of the words for a yogi is an abhyasi. An abhyasi is a practitioner. So that's a prerequisite to be a yogi, is you have to practice. You have to have a sadhana, a daily sadhana. So the daily sadhana, I mean, it's not like you get up in the morning and say, should I practice today? I don't know, I'm feeling a little stiff and feeling a little sore. I could have gotten a little more sleep last night. I ate kind of late. Maybe I'll just blow it off today. Do you have that option? I mean, if you're really going to be a yogi? No, it's not really an option. You don't go there. You do your sadhana because that's what you do to stay healthy and sane. It's part of your daily hygiene. It's like taking a shower, brushing your teeth, like that. Okay. But we need to practice with from an interesting perspective, with vairagyapyam, with Viagra. And I recently celebrated my 60th birthday, and one of my friends who thinks he's a real funny guy brought me this giant barrel of Viagra. It was really blue M&Ms. I hope that's what it was, because my daughter ate a bunch of them. Vairagyam means with non-attachment. So we need to practice, but we practice with non-attachment. Non-attachment to what? To the result? Non-attachment to anything else? Hmm? Anything else? Non-attachment to who we think we are, where we think we're going. Yeah, non-attachment to anything. It's really, that keeps us stuck in samsara, which, as we all know, is hala hala, right? So, yeah, human beings seem to be fairly prone to attachment. Have you noticed? Mind is very sticky. The body is very sticky. Heart also very sticky. Many things seem to get stuck inside. So we start to practice yoga, and immediately we're confronted with all the things we're clinging to inside us. In our physical structure, in our attempt to breathe, in our emotional body, in our conditioned mind. Many things inside that we're hanging on to. So in a sense, the practice of yoga is really the art of learning how to let go. All the things that we're hanging on to that are preventing us from moving forward, from realizing our true potential, for being all that we can be, right? Without enlisting in the army. Because that's what our sadhana is for, really, is to accelerate our evolutionary process. But if we're stuck in samsara literally means the whirlpool, going round and round and round and round in the endless cycle of repetitive experience, unless we begin to let go of that cycle. How do we let go? Well, first we got to see it, become aware of it to some degree. And then maybe we have the choice. We can begin to let go a little bit. But the letting go process, it's a fairly lengthy process. Those of you who've been practicing a while maybe have discovered you get through one layer, and what do you find underneath that? Another layer. Many layers are there. So it's a lifelong process. So it's a work in progress, so to speak. Okay, so what are some of the ways that we get stuck What are some of the obstacles we confront along the way? Patanjali devotes one sutra to some common obstacles we encounter as human beings as we practice. So we'll skip to this one. It's a fairly long list. Vyadi, Sthana, Samshaya, Pramada, Alasya, Aviriti, Bhranti Darshana, Alabdha Bhumikatva, Anavasti Tatvani, Chitta, Vikshepa, Te, Antarayaha. We won't try to do the whole thing because it was kind of long. But if we start at the end of this sutra, we have the word Antarayaha, which means obstacle. What are the obstacles that Vikshepa? Vikshepa means to scatter. That scatter the chit. That cause the chit to hit the fan, so to speak. Or that create the chitta vrittis. So it's an interesting list. In a sense, he starts with the grossest manifestation of obstacle and works towards more and more subtle obstacles. So the grossest manifestation of obstacle is called vyadi. Vyadi means illness. So this is something that finally gets our attention when we get sick. And we go, oh, wow, something went wrong. This causes us to stop and address our physical vehicle, which is broken down temporarily. So in Ashtanga Yoga, of course, we have primary series, Yoga Chikitsa. What's it designed to do? Basically, it's designed to restore health to the body, quite simply. And then second one is called Sthana. Sthana means kind of stagnation. So if stagnation persists, what does it lead to? Illness. So what's the cure for stagnation? Movement. Right. So we talked about Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti is said to be composed of three essential qualities, what are called sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the sattvic quality is the quality of harmony, balance, equanimity, peace, luminosity. It's the good guna, as they're called. Rajas, the rajasic quality, is the quality of movement, activity, heat, desire, sometimes frustration, anger. And then the tamasic quality is the quality of inertia, heaviness, density, sometimes toxicity, darkness. So if we get sick, which guna has become predominant? Tamas, right. In the state of sthana, stagnation, which guna are we stuck in? Tamas. So if we're in this tamasic state, how do we get out of it? We need some rajas. Yeah, it's tough to make the leap directly from tamas to sattva. So rajas is sort of the intermediary guna. So rajas is characterized by movement, and the practice of Ashtanga Yoga obviously is characterized by movement. It's a breath-based practice, And the nature of breath is vritti. It moves. When we inhale and we exhale, the breath is moving. When we integrate breath and movement, what do we create? Vinyasa, right? So vinyasa is designed to remove stagnation from the system, to get things moving, get things circulating, break up the density, break up the stagnation, break up the heaviness, the lethargy, the inertia, movement. It's important. So vyadhisthana samshaya. Samshaya means doubt. So doubt, this is more like mental stagnation. So is there a cure for doubt? What do we need to do when we get stuck in that place of doubt? What?
Experience.
We need experience. We need to take some sort of action. Otherwise, we're just sitting there spinning our wheels, right? Should I do this? Should I do that? So the mind here is what? Spinning, maybe rajasic. So, as Guruji used to say, people would come to him and they'd have all their doubts. Guruji, I don't know if this practice is really for me. I'm really sore. I had this little pain in my shoulder. I think I'm going to tweak my knee a little bit. I had this rash on my back. So I don't know if I should practice. What do you think? And what would Guruji say? You do. Don't fear. You do. He had great faith in the practice. And, it's easy to get caught up in this place of doubting. But, as long as you're stuck thinking that the world of Prakriti is permanent, you're wrong. Because the nature of Prakriti is what? Change. Body is always changing. Mind is always changing. Practice is always changing. Don't think that it's fixed, because it isn't. It's not fixed. Whatever you're feeling today, tomorrow, you'll be feeling something different. You can count on it. Okay, so you do. Don't just sit there and spin your wheels. So, and then we have pramada. Pramada is a kind of impatience. So finally, we're compelled to act. Okay, I'm gonna deal with my doubts. I'm gonna take action. But the mind is still kind of in that rajasic state. So, what quality do you bring to your action then? Sort of this impatient quality. You want things to happen now. I want to get better. I want to improve. I want to progress. I want to get this pose. Whatever. So this kind of impatience breeds a kind of carelessness. So the mind here again has gotten too rajasic. So what's the cure for this rajasic quality of mind that makes us impatient and careless? What's our primary tool to focus on in yoga that keeps bringing us back to the present moment? Yeah, breath, really. So we have these ways of staying connected to the breath, right? We add audio. And I'm breathing in. I'm breathing out. So you breathe with sound, automatically it cultivates that capacity to listen. And when you listen, what happens to the quality of your mind? Your mind begins to chill a little bit, to listen. We had choreography. You know, inhale, lift your arms. Exhale, bend forward. You know, just a way of making breathing more interesting. I mean, you got to breathe anyway. Right? Might as well make it interesting. You make breathing interesting, then you're more likely to be attentive to the breath. And basically, there's a strong relationship between the quality of the prana and the quality of the chitta. So when you're really attentive to breath, the breath gets long and smooth and conscious. So being attentive to the breath builds which guna? That's the sattvic piece. Applying our consciousness to the act of breathing. That brings in the sattvic element. This is the good guna. So breath is our best friend, always in practice. Okay, and then there's alasya. Laziness. Laziness. Which guna has got a hold of us here? Tamas. Again. So what's the cure for laziness? Again, we need that rajas again. Guruji would say, oh yes, Surya Namaskara, you do. Whatever. 5 A's, 5 B's. As a prescription for insanity, his recommendation was 12 A's and 12 B's. So, okay, and then there's aviditi. Aviditi. You know, this pose. What's it called? Virasana. What does it mean? The hero's pose, right? Named in honor of Mahavira. Yeah, Hanuman, the great hero. So in Sanskrit, if you put an A in front of a word, what happens to the meaning? Opposite, right? So, like vidya means knowledge, avidya, ignorance. Should be purity, ashuddhi, impurity. Vira, heroic, avira. So, avidity, does it mean that you're a coward? Or what does it mean? There's another word that's closely related, which is the word virya. Virya means vitality. So avidity usually is translated as intemperance, immoderation, something like that. The kind of behavior that saps us of vitality. Anyone familiar with that kind of behavior? In their past was prone to overindulgence. Yeah, basically anything done to excess tends to sap your vitality. Right, so suppose at the end of the evening tonight, you're really disappointed in the class tonight. You were thinking, God, I was really hoping it was going to be a good class, but, and do all those damn yoga sutras. We had to sit there. We barely got to move. His jokes weren't really that funny. So afterwards, you go out and to drown your sorrows, you order yourself a couple of drinks and eat a huge meal and top it off with a couple of desserts. But then you say, well, I'm signed up for the whole weekend, so I'll give them another chance tomorrow morning. So you come back in here tomorrow morning and you face your mat, and what's that experience going to be like? Probably not that pleasant. So how do we become more moderate? What's the key? Well, the key is just our consistency in our practice. Right? If you devote enough time and energy, if you prioritize your sadhana every day, then, you're going to want to come to the mat in a state that, you can do a good practice. You don't want to come in hungover or with lack of sleep or whatever, bloated from the night before, or sick, or whatever. Okay, so Guruji used to always say, anyone can do this practice. And then he would say, not everyone will do this practice. This is not for lazy people. Okay, then we get into some really interesting obstacles. They're getting more subtle now. Bhranti darshana. So you know this word, darshana? Like the 6 schools of Indian philosophy are called darshanas. What does darshana mean in this context? Well, it refers to a perspective or a viewpoint, a way of looking at things. So darshana has to do with seeing things. And like if you're in the presence of an enlightened being, they say you're receiving darshan. The darshan literally means something like the loving glance transmitted through the eyes of such a being. But Bhranti darshana, on the other hand, this is not the loving glance. This is more like the dirty mirror. Bhranti darshana is not seeing things clearly, having illusions or delusions about yourself and others and the world. So how do we address our illusions? Is there a way? Practice. Yeah, I mean a key element is what's called tapaha, or tapas. Tapas is, we could call it the sacred fire. So when we practice, one of the things we're trying to generate is this tapas, this heat that purifies. And so the idea is once we emerge from the sacred fire, we're in a greater state of clarity. So Patanjali specifically says we bring mastery to the indriyas, the sense organs. We wash the windows of perception clean. And when the windows of perception have been washed clean, then we see things differently, including ourselves. It's like removing a layer of film from our spectacles, something like that. We see more clearly, so we can see some of the illusions, perhaps, that we couldn't see before. Or sometimes Bhranti darshana is sort of clinging to fundamentalism rather than just being sort of fluid in the moment, to fall back on like a fundamentalistic way or approach to life. Like clinging to certain religious beliefs. Or, what happens even in Ashtanga Yoga, we have the fundamentalists. There's no fun in fundamentalism. But, yoga is something that's designed to open our body and open our mind and open our heart. It's not something that's designed to give us tunnel vision, just make us more narrow in our approach to life. To make us more responsive to the moment. So rather than having to cling to some fundamentalistic beliefs, Just open your mind, open your eyes, open your heart. Keep breathing. See things for what they are, rather than through the filter of some fundamentalism. Again, there's no fun in fundamentalism. There's duh, and there's the mental part. Okay, but which accent? It's not the fun, it's the duh part. So Bhranti Darshana, there are a couple more. Alabdha Bhumikatva. Whatever that means, huh? Bhumi? Bhumi refers to the earth. So Alabdha Bhumikatva refers to not being firmly planted on the earth. And one of the manifestations of that is like it's difficult to take the next step because you don't have a good grip. There's a tendency to backslide or to lack perseverance, or maybe just a tendency not to inhabit your body very well. So, what's the cure for this? Lack of groundedness?
Be in your body.
Be in your body. So is asana a good tool for learning how to be in your body? It is. Yeah. And the first series in particular it's really the grounding series. You know, in the beginning with the sun salutations. Oh, thank you. The sun salutations basically are vinyasas built around a particular pose. What's the pose? The downward dog. Right? The downward dog. Is the downward dog a particularly grounding pose? Yeah, 4 legs. We do much standing poses, grounding poses. Forward bends, grounding. Forward bends are the expression of the apana. The apana. Apa means water. How does water flow? That's the way the exhalation flows. Okay, so first series, learning how to be in your body. Krishnamacharya used to say that the fundamental intimacy we need to establish is the intimacy with our own body. So that's the intent of asana, to establish that intimacy with one's own body. Because he said, without establishing that fundamental intimacy, no other intimacy is really possible. So maybe at some point in our yogic process, we'll have some sort of transcendent beyond the body experience. But, first things first, we'd like to have a within the body experience. We've been given this wonderful vehicle to transport our soul around him. And, it's good to explore it, learn to take care of it, nurture it, love it. Okay, so only one more obstacle. Anavasti tatvani. So the key word here is the word stit. Same word as in samastitihi. What does it mean there? It means steady, stable. So anavasta tatvani refers to instability. And in the previous obstacle, we were talking about physical instability. But this one really relates more to mental instability, which sort of is the root of all the other obstacles, mental instability. So how do we deal with our mental instability? Pills? Possible. Well, in Ashtanga Yoga, we have what's called the Tristana, the three stabilizing focuses. What are they? What are the three things to focus on when you practice? Breath, number one. What else? Drishti, number two. Everyone always thinks it's Bandha. Bandha is really considered to be an aspect of breath, so it doesn't get a separate category. The third one is too obvious, we miss it. It's the posture, the asana. So every asana, there are certain actions that are occurring, right? So just being aware of what your feet are doing, what your knees are doing, what your hips are doing, what your shoulders are doing, what your head's doing, what your perineum is doing, all that stuff. So if you're focused on breath and drishti and posture, what happens to your mind? It becomes more focused. It becomes more stable, right? So it becomes more sattvic, basically. Sattvic, rather than rajasic. The rajasic mind is in that state of vritti. The tamasic mind is in the state of avidya, ignorance. Okay, so could you relate to any of those obstacles? So when any or all of those obstacles are in effect, then they have very real manifestations in our lives, in our body, in our mind, in our heart. So in the next sutra, Patanjali talks about how these obstacles manifest.